Hi, I'm Matthew Meyer. You're the second son, obviously you know that. And
Yeah.
Mike and I will be asking you questions. We're here in San Diego, California to celebrate your 60th anniversary. And we thought we would do a video so you guys can communicate to your descendants about what life was, what your core values are. We're going to ask questions and just hopefully have a flow of communication back and forth to know more about you. Not so much for Mike and I, but definitely for our kids' kids, even maybe, hopefully even their kids. So 3 or 4 generations down, we have it. So please tell us about yourself. Mom, we can start with you. Tell us your birthday, tell us your full name, your date of birth, where you were born.
Okay. My full name right now is Laura Lynn Merritt Meyer.
Great.
I have always gone by Lynn because my mother's name was Laura.
What was your mother's middle name?
Margaret.
Laura?
Her name was Laura Margaret Ford Merritt.
Nice. And when were you born?
I was born February 11th, 1937.
Where?
In Ilion, New York. That's spelled I-L-I-O-N.
Okay, you told us that you're spelling it because other people misspell it, or?
Because they
No.
have no idea how to spell it.
So what part of New York is that in?
Upstate New York, up near Mohawk, Syracuse, Utica, those up in that area.
From a New Yorker's viewpoint, that's compared to West Virginia.
Oh, really? Oh. Okay, Dad, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I was born in Rochester, New York, the big city at
big
that
city.
point.
What's
From
your full
Kodak.
name?
George Edward Meyer Jr.
You're
which
a junior, not a second.
Right. I dropped junior as soon as I could because it was a pain to always go with JR after the end of it. So I was born in 1936, October 14th, on a Thursday.
No, you're Wednesday, I'm Thursday.
Okay, Wednesday.
What year?
1936
He said that.
Sorry.
at General Memorial Hospital in Rochester, New York.
Were you born in a hospital? Mom?
No, I was born at home on Clark Street
Clark
in
Street.
Ilion, New York.
Wow. Were all your siblings born at home?
Even Jack and Kelly?
No, Jack and Kelly were not. They were born in Rochester, in a hospital.
And they're 10 years younger than you, approximately.
And Jack is 9 years younger. Kelly is 10 years younger. I have a brother that's a year and 2 months older, and a brother that's a year and 3 days younger. I'm right in the middle of the two.
So then how did you get from Ilion, did I pronounce that right,
Uh-huh.
to Rochester?
My dad couldn't get work in Ilion. It's a small town, and so he moved to Rochester, New York. I think he moved there because he had a couple brothers there.
Tell me
So-
a little bit about your dad.
My dad's name is William Clifford Merritt, and he was born April 30th, 1910. Right? Yours were 05. 1910, yeah.
Well, what did he do?
He was a realtor at the end of his life, but before that he worked for Teal Machine Company for many years, and he was a quality control and
Charge of it.
in charge of quality control there. Before that, he worked for
Bosch and Moms.
Bausch and Lomb, and actually, when we first moved there, he worked for Bausch and Lomb. I was in kindergarten when we moved to Rochester.
What are
And
some of your memories of moving to Rochester?
the first memory I can think of is we moved in this house, and the milkman came.
Tell us what a milkman is. Just right now, just what's a milkman?
A man, the companies delivered the milk to your house. And
Every day, every other day, every once a week?
I think it was as often as you needed it.
And it was always a man.
It was always a man, yes. I've never...
Then we had milk boxes on the
Yeah,
side of the house.
that's what I was just going to say. There was a box at the side of the house. They opened the door and they put it in, and then there's a door on the inside. We opened it and took it out.
Wow.
We we did not have an ice box at that time, but many of our neighbors did.
So
And
an ice box would be considered
a refrigerator
today.
that was not electric. So you needed big chunks of ice to keep, almost like a big cooler, but huge. And the Iceman would come in a truck, and he would chop the ice to the size you needed it. And the kids loved it in the summertime because we would jump up and get the chips off the ice that he chopped, and it was nice and cool. We loved doing that.
So there was no flavor? You couldn't put like...
No, it was just a big chunk of ice.
Okay. So you had an Iceman, a milkman.
Yeah,
Any other kind of man that come to your house?
yeah, we had the bread man,
So
a
everyone
bakery.
delivered to your house, basically?
Yes,
And
they
this
came
is
down the
everyone.
street
It's
and.
everyone.
And it was for all the neighbors. Sometimes they'd just stop at certain points and you'd go out and get it. But the milkman came right to the house.
I would think the Iceman would come to your house too.
Yes, the Iceman would have
this-
to come right to your
Dad,
house
you had Iceman and milkman. And,
Yeah, all
and,
that.
And then how did you heat your house?
with coal.
So we had a coal man.
You had a coal man. come
And
to
that
your
was
house,
even
too.
fun because they put it in your cellar. We had cellars then. And there was a big window, and they would come up and they had this, it looked like a slide. And then they would open up their truck and all the coal would go right into the coal bin.
Nice.
Then you'd have to take a shovel get the coal out of the coal bin and put it into the furnace to keep it going.
Wow.
And what happened if you didn't put the coal in the furnace for a period of time and you'd have to start the fire again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was that a kid's responsibility? Was that,
it could be.
yeah, well, did your brothers have to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was their job? Mm-hmm. What about you, Dad? You probably,
I don't remember doing it at
Okay.
all. I remember it going out sometime and they would start the thing with a little bit of kindling wood and paper. Then once that got going, throw the coal in it. But I was kept away from that for the most part.
So over the summer, no air conditioning.
Oh,
No.
No.
What do you do? Windows?
Windows.
You have fans?
We didn't have too many.
I don't remember any fans.
Fans? Did it get hot in the summer?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And what do you do? Just
You
dump
lived with it.
Yeah.
You took off clothes.
And now I'm going to ask some dumb questions. What about electricity?
Yes, we had.
Yes, we had
Electricity?
electricity.
And it was consistent, ran all the time?
Yeah,
Yes.
we didn't have the,
TV?
no,
Cable?
no,
Cell phones?
no.
Internet?
Oh, I talked about phones.
We
Talk
Yeah.
about their phone.
We had a radio.
You had a radio. There was your
About
entertainment.
that's big, da-da-da, and we'd sit around and listen to it.
Ah, so what did people do for fun or entertainment?
Play
Listen
cards.
to the radio.
And play cards, yeah.
Play cards.
That was,
Tell about the telephone. Talk to us about
okay, the
telephones.
telephone we first had is what we call a party line, and there was several people. If you picked up the phone, they might be talking to
So
somebody.
you had several houses on the same.
Same line.
And were kids, customarily using the phone?
No, we never used the phone.
Well, I used it because I always called my aunt, and it was Glenwood 2939J, and the J was indicated the party line because there were other people that had Glenwood 2939, and
But
then the
it'd be-
J.
So
How
would
would
you
you make
dial
it?
it?
Yeah,
or
how would you make
Oh,
it
you
call?
talk to the operator.
So you pick it up, talk
We-
to an operator.
Yes.
We had no dials and what have you. Eventually, I think in the 50s we got to the dials, but
Gotcha.
not when we were growing up. It was always
And in the 50s, they got to a private line when the dials came in.
And
I
also in the
think.
50s we got natural gas that replaced coal.
Ah, nice.
So that
So
so
the
it was-
50s seemed really like
The
important to you.
changing, yeah.
It was like a good decade.
yeah, and
Was there
in
a war
the
in the
early 50s, this is recovering from the Second World War.
Recovering from the
We
Second
also
World War.
had, well, at least we got an electric refrigerator sometime in the
we
early
did too.
50s, and my mother and father redecorated the kitchen, so to take out the ice box and put in a refrigerator and a gas stove. That was.
Mom, you were talking about moving from Ilion to Rochester, and the milkman came.
Yeah.
Tell them about your memory there. What was it that really struck you? From that
The
milkman?
thing I remember was he gave us a quart of milk and a pound of cottage cheese, and it was the only things in our refrigerator.
Wow. And did you have shoes?
There was one time I did not have shoes to wear to school.
No shoes to wear to school. So you went to school barefoot.
No, I borrowed my mother's shoes, but they made fun of me all day long.
See what I mean about West Virginia?
And you said you recently went back to Rochester. What struck you about going back to Rochester?
You can talk on that.
Well, okay. Basically, when we grew up, the streets were just plain streets. There was no cars on the streets. And like I was telling you, the house was separated by a driveway. And usually there would be a garage in the back. But there was only one car per family if they were lucky. So there was nothing on the street except for the deliveries or something like that. So when we went back, just a couple months ago, there's cars parked on both sides of the street, and the street seems much more narrower, and kids weren't playing in the street like we did. I mean, we had the kickball, we kicked the can in the middle of the street, and at least my street on Vanburg, we had a factory at the end of the street, Stromberg Carlson, and at 4 o'clock or so, all the cars came out, and it was a very busy street, and then when that was over with, it was empty. You know, occasionally a car would come down. It was almost like a cul-de-sac, but this was a through street. But we were playing on the street. We'd have baseball games and what have you.
So I think most people will know what a baseball game is in the future, but maybe not kick the can. What exactly is kick the can?
You kick the. It's like hitting a ball. You'd kick the can and then run for a base, to be safe and what have you. So
it was like baseball, but with a can.
You're kicking it. And you didn't have a pitcher. You just.
No, you just kicked the can.
Kicked it and.
Is that because you didn't have a bat and ball?
You kicked it. You didn't have a bat and ball at that
You
time.
just had a can, so
Yeah.
that's what you played with.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now tell us about your parents. Why don't we start?
Okay,
with
my,
that?
my parents were born in Rochester, New York. I really don't know if they were born in a hospital or home, but I'm assuming since they were born in 1905, they were likely born at home and what have you. Now my father, in particular, was born up on the east side of Rochester, and as far as I can tell, he never went to school. Well, he went to school, lived, worked, in basically in a 5-mile radius.
And died.
And died in that whole 5-mile radius in the city. My mother.
How far did he get in his education?
He didn't get out of high school, but I don't think he got out of grammar school. Just barely got out of the grammar school. So at one point, he was in a club and he was like a secretary. My mother would transcribe his notes so they were legible and what have you.
Now, was she educated?
My mother was the first one on the family, or from the Meyer, and she was a Strobel, and she was the first one to graduate from high school in that generation and what have you. She was very proud of it. She had a very neat handwriting that she was proud of, and worked as a bookkeeper. And they got married in 1929, and the Depression started shortly thereafter. And she kept her job. My father was working or was in charge of some sort of business. I'm not quite sure. They sold plants and they sold other things and what have you. He lost his job in the 30s, early 30s, and he was out of work for either 5 or 6 years, and she was the one that supported the family, and as a bookkeeper. And then in 1935 or 36, he got a job as a chauffeur, which was interesting in the sense that he had a cap and he wore a jacket and what have you, and drove Buicks for the Townsend family, and
Who owned the
who were involved in a
newspaper, weren't they?
they were related to Gannett's, which had the newspaper, and related to people that made baby food. Gerber's baby food. So they had a big house, and the thing I remember going over there, they had room in a garage for 4 cars. In the middle of the garage was a big turntable. So you drive the car on the turntable, rotate it, then back it into a parking spot.
Wow.
And,
How'd you rotate it?
by
Manually?
hand.
By
You just
hand?
pushed it
All right.
around and what have you. And when I went over there and visited, I'd just spin around it, making a merry-go-round. But
Do you see anything like that today? I don't remember seeing anything.
I
like
don't
that
think
today.
anything like that I've seen.
Oh, interesting.
So he was there basically through the late 30s. In fact, he had the job and he ended up buying a car, 1936 Chevy, that we had until 1950. That car was it and what have
14
you.
years.
Yeah. And when I was born, they brought me on Illinois Street, which was one block over from where I grew up. Okay, I was born in 36 or 38. They bought the house on Vanburg and lived there lived there essentially all their life. That's when my father died there. So
Tell me something. There's a story I remember. I can't remember specifically. He drove a Buick for all his life, and then changed to Chevy, or drove a Chevy and changed to Buick.
he drove the Buick as a chauffeur.
Okay.
Then and he drove the Chevy until 1950, and he bought another Chevy. And then in 1955, he bought a Plymouth.
Plymouth.
And then he went to Dodges after that. I think it was.
Yeah. So, but in 1955, he had the opportunity to buy a Chevy Bel Air.
Yeah, and her father bought that.
And your father bought the Bel Air.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
Tell me.
my father bought the Plymouth, which was peach color, which it's just not a particularly good car.
Did you have many choices of colors of cars when he bought that car? How many
Not
choices?
like you do today.
Yeah.
Just a few white, black.
But there weren't a lot of cars on the road. I mean,
Compared.
I used to be able to stand at the bus stop and tell you. You knew what car it was by looking at it. You can't tell today. It's harder.
Yeah. So many different models. And
Yeah.
Okay, that's a different point right now. I walked to school 3 blocks, and you walked 5 or 6 blocks to
Yeah,
school.
I know it was farther than you.
We grew up maybe 7 or 8 blocks apart, but she was on the other side of the main Culver Road, and she went to one school this way, I went to another school this way. And
So you didn't know. So maybe
No,
this is a
but-
good time. How did you guys meet?
Okay, you
Okay.
should take that one because
And let's
Well-
get back to this question because I want there's family
Yes,
history
yeah.
on your side that we still need to get to. So let's.
all right. Start
Okay.
here. Go.
Start with your. Tell us about
Oh,
your father's dad.
okay.
About.
All right. My father was one of 9 children.
Okay.
His dad, from what I understand, he drank a lot, and he left them all, and
all the time, or did he come and go?
he may have come and gone. I really don't know. I didn't know either one of my grandfathers. They were gone by the time I was born. I knew my one grandmother lived with us on Clark Street in Ilion, and when we moved to Rochester, she wouldn't come, and she died shortly thereafter. So I only had one grandmother as I was growing up. But anyway, my dad's father changed his name. We were not always Merritts. He was a Merritt. He was not a Merritt to begin with. I believe his name was Hannum, and it was spelled Hannum. And there's a couple stories going around that he was a boxer and he killed somebody in the ring, and that's why he changed his name. And there was another one that he was in business with his brothers and cheated them, and so that's why he moved away and changed his name. I don't know the true story there, but he did change his name. We were not always Merritts.
Interesting.
Then you got a great story about your father working, cutting wood and what have you. And
Oh, my dad was not in the service. He was in what they called the CCCs, which is the Civil Conservation Corps.
Yeah.
And I know they went around and I think it was up in Montana, wasn't it,
Yeah.
that he went and
Your
cut
father?
my father,
Cliff. Clifford.
William Clifford Merritt.
Okay, I was waiting for the story
About the potato soup?
potato soup. That was okay. Good.
Yeah, they worked hard, and he tells about a story that his mother one day brought him this for the thermos of potato soup. And he was so hungry at the time, he loved it. But then when my mother made potato soup, none of us kids, 5 kids, we didn't like it. And it was the only time he made us sit there and eat something we didn't like because he loved it so much. And that family grew up on potatoes, and sometimes if you're at the end of the table, because they had 9 kids, you didn't get very many. So they went hungry a lot. We came from a very poor background.
But that was everybody at that time.
Yes, it was a rough time.
Yeah.
It really was.
Okay, was it your grandfather that drove the car in and said ho?
Yeah, well, he got his first car and he drove it in the garage, or the barn, I guess at that time, and he told it to whoa like the horses.
That's a good story.
He went through the back of the...
At the back of the barn.
Brand new car.
The barn.
Great. Okay, so now I'm glad we learned that your family's not always a merit. So
Right.
We're not true merits.
That's right. No merit in our blood.
So tell us again. Then should we go to how you guys met?
Okay,
We're
go
just
back
talking
to
about
that.
Okay, well, basically, I was behind Bill Merritt in high school,
Who's my brother?
her brother, her younger brother,
Yeah.
and all the classes. I'm behind him,
Because it's
Alphabetical.
alphabetical
Meyer.
and what have you. And he attracted me because I never saw anybody eat bean sandwiches before. He had white bread with beans,
Baked bean
beans on it and what
sandwich
have you.
and ketchup.
And he had a wicked sense of humor, and we joked and had fun.
Now, would that have been because he didn't have a lot of money?
I have
Was that
no
kind of
idea.
a
He had
poor-person thing to eat?
Well,
Bean
we
sandwich?
ate a lot of
He had
beans and
bologna.
bologna sandwiches, yeah.
Yeah.
But there was a unique situation how you got to become his friends. And
Yeah, how you got
You're
to-
older than him, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to talk about
Okay,
that a little bit?
basically, I had an accident that affected my eye.
When you
And-
were in,
We spent our summers in Canandaigua, which was a lake 30 miles away from Rochester. My uncle had it. And I had a
Uncle
canoe,
Guy?
Uncle Guy. And it was Uncle Guy and Aunt Carrie that spoiled me quite nicely.
they
And,
never had any children.
Basically, in a canoe, I had an accident that affected my eye. And I was in the hospital and confined to bed looking through pinhole glasses for the best part of 6 months. And as a result, I missed a whole year of school. My first year of Edison Tech, it was Edison Technical and Industrial High School. So I missed the first year with my buddies that I went to grammar school with. We went from kindergarten to 8th grade at 28 high school, number 28 school. And then we had a choice. You go to a regular high school or a technical and industrial high school. And my best friends went to Edison Tech, and I was going to Edison, and I missed that first year. So then I was now behind them and was making friends with her younger brother. And as we had the football games and what have you, and went to a football game. He was there with her, and she smiled and winked at me, so I was kind of attracted to her.
Not.
Okay. You're at a football game and you saw her for the first time. Did you guys have any kind of communication at that time, or just said hi, or just got introduced?
Kind of like that, kind of.
Both being kind of introverted.
And you didn't.
So
I
who
didn't-
chased who?
Yeah, who chased
He
you?
chased me. I didn't like him.
You didn't like
You didn't
him?
like him?
Not at all.
Why didn't you like him?
Well, in the first place, he was tall, and I didn't really go for the tall ones. In the second place, he was skinny. He had on a turtleneck sweater and a cigar in his mouth and a cowbell. He had nothing appealed to me.
We made the cowbells at Technical and Industrial. They had a welding shop, so they'd make a welding.
And
bell
they used them at
For
the
the
football
game,
game.
Yeah.
When they scored.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So he was annoying.
Yes, very.
So I was smart enough to keep coming around to Bill's house, and she happened to be there.
There you go.
So then, how did he win you over?
Well, I started with her mother.
Oh, really?
He did.
Hey,
Now it gets
good.
interesting.
She loved me.
So the mother loved you. Did you like her cooking, or what? Well,
No.
How did you get Grandma?
Okay, you want to know?
Go ahead.
She asked him, what was it, your address or your phone number? He couldn't remember, and she felt so sorry for him because I was there. It made him nervous.
I don't remember that at all.
I do.
You got tongue tied.
Yes.
Right.
And she thought he was so cute.
Now, did Bill know that you kind of liked her?
I assume he figured it out when I kept visiting with after a
No,
bit.
he knew because it was him and my mother that kept saying, well, you at least give him a chance. Go out with him.
So
And so, what was your first date like?
probably the drive-in.
Yeah, that's what we used to, we either that or bowling.
You know.
That's the two things we used to do.
Did you ask her out? How did you ask
Yeah,
her?
sure.
You know, he did.
And she ended up postponing me because she was going out with a short Italian canoeing.
Oh, this hold it. Whoa, this now got very interesting. So she stood you up or postponed.
Postponed it because
she was for another guy.
she was trying out somebody else.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So you played the field, Mom.
No,
right?
I
Yeah.
didn't.
You were a player.
And she was a dancer at that time. She was taking dancing lessons and what have you. And I definitely wasn't a dancer.
No, he's definitely not.
So tell us about your first job, Mom. What
My
point
first
did you
job?
get a job?
Okay, I went to an all-girls school. He went to an all-boys school. So we wouldn't have met if he
Is
hadn't
that
known my
normal?
brother.
Was that a normal thing, or is that not?
No, that wasn't the normal high school. I went to, in fact, we were Baptist, but I went to this Catholic high school
Oh, interesting.
because I was interested in, well, I took secretarial courses is what I did. It was a 2-year high school, St. Joseph Commercial High School, which isn't there anymore. And by the way, when we went back to Rochester, my grammar school's not there anymore either. And we went by numbers. It was number 33, and yours was number
28.
28. And but anyway, when I turned 16, I got a part-time job at Rochester News Company. And then after graduation, and I graduated when I was 16, I stayed there for a little while and worked for them. But then they had and they delivered magazines, trucks of and I took in thousands of dollars every night, every day. The drivers would come in with. That's the way they used to. The companies, the stores would buy their magazines from these drivers. So, but anyway, they had to lay me off, and my aunt was working for Westplex,
Yes, Westplex.
who made plastic products. And she
Injection molding.
molding plastic products, and so she asked me to come there and help in that office. She was working in that office all by herself, and they were getting bigger, getting more orders. They needed help, so I went and became the secretary there, and she stayed as the bookkeeper. And it was interesting. I took 2 buses to get there. And then I went down 2 floors in the building, and that's where it was, in the bottom,
In the basement. Huh?
in the basement of the building.
Now, did you have an allowance growing up?
I never had an allowance, and when I worked, and even when I babysat, I paid room and board.
Do you remember how much a room and board that was?
No, I don't remember. I do not. I didn't. I mean, it was so normal, I didn't even think twice
Just
about
to help.
it. You just did it just to
part of
help the family.
Help the family. Mm-hmm. And Dad, did you ever have to pay room and board?
No.
He's an only child.
I accumulated money wherever I could. In fact, I had a bank account. In grammar school, they had, like on
Yeah,
Mondays,
at school.
you'd sign up a thing and you'd have a bank account that, I think my mother always gave me $1 or something to put in it. And when I cashed in, sometime after high school, at Rochester Savings Bank, I think I had somewhere around $500 that had accumulated
That
over,
was
over
good
a period of
and
time.
Yeah, it's a lot.
very
It's a lot
good in
of
that
yeah.
time of year.
Who encouraged you in your education? We haven't got to your education yet, but Dad, I know you're very educated, and who helped encourage you to go to college and go to?
I would like to say my father, but my grandfather also, they basically strongly encouraged me. They said, with my hands, they would never fit a shovel. That's what it boiled down to, that they were too long or whatever it was. And my mother was proud of her high school. So I guess the point is that they all expected me to go to college and get an education, because that was the way out of lower middle class to get to upper middle class. So it, like I said, I went to a technical industrial. We had two paths. You could learn a trade. Her brother ended up being a tool and die maker, and I went to college at Rensselaer. And at one point, we were making comparable salaries, as he as a tool maker and me as a metallurgist. And
But he was working with his hands.
Did you say where you went to college?
Rensselaer.
Rensselaer,
You did,
yeah.
Rensselaer Polytechnic.
In Troy, New York.
Which grandparent? Which was it? A Meyer, your dad's dad, or your mom's dad?
My mother's dad.
Tell us a little about what he did.
Okay. Okay. When I knew him, growing up, he died when I was like 12 or 13 years old. He basically worked for the water company, Rochester Water Company, and I'm assuming he was digging something or ditches, because that's how he died, with a shovel in his hand, after telling me that I'd never had one that fit. But he and his brother and father owned a bar in Rochester at one time in early part of the century, and my mother and my grandfather lived over the bar, and she told a story one time that somebody shot a bullet through the window where she lived, and another time she must have ticked off her father because he chased her and she climbed over a fence to get away from him. I don't, but anyhow, they had a bar, and I looked up the record one time, and at some point, Prohibition was coming. This is where they passed a law where you couldn't sell alcohol and what have you. And they tried to convert it into a restaurant. This is by the manuals that I was seeing. And at some point, my grandfather, Joseph Strobel, separated from his family. I don't know whatever happened. His brother and father separated, whatever. I was never conscious of him ever talking to them in the time frame that I was involved with him and what have you. So my father always used to say he thought he was doing well to marry my mother because her father owned a bar. He thought that was a great position to be in and what have you, but Prohibition sort of killed that. Both my mother and father were born in 1905. And
do you remember what year Prohibition was?
It started in the late 20s. I'm not quite sure. I think it got killed in about 32. So I'm guessing it was about 1925 in that range.
This was countrywide. No
Countrywide.
one was allowed to drink alcohol.
Yeah, and this is where you have all the movies about the gangsters in Chicago bootlegging and all this sort of business.
Wow.
And my father would have streaks of drinking a fair amount. And
During Prohibition or after Prohibition?
yes,
So how did he get alcohol during Prohibition?
through bootleggers.
All right.
And
People would make it on
Yeah.
their own in their backyard, kind of thing.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, one of the, my first job, well, it was delivering a weekly paper, which gave me something like 70 cents every 2 weeks or something like that. I delivered papers door to door. They were free. They were the 18th Ward for some reason. And at Christmas time, you'd sell calendars, and I would make some was in the neighborhood of $20 to $50 selling calendars to my people. I had 2 routes, all in the neighborhood that I could walk to.
How old were you?
with him.
How old were you then?
Starting, let's see, I had to be in the 6th grade, I think, when I started in that range. So how old are you at
12.
6th grade? 12, 13, in that range.
What could $10 buy you? You said you'd make 10, 20 bucks selling calendars. What could you buy for $10?
Anything I wanted, quite frankly. I can't really imagine it. I can't think about it.
When my first job was only 25 cents an hour.
25
That's what
cents
we
an
made.
hour.
What I made.
what
You
can you
made
buy-
27 and a half
Yeah.
cents an
What
hour.
could you buy for 25 cents at that time?
Lots of candy.
Lots of candy.
I don't know.
It truly was penny candy.
Yeah, there was penny candy. Lots of it.
Shoes, as I recall, we had a shoe store down at the end of Vanburg, and shoes were in the range of $5 for moccasins or sneakers or what have you.
Coffee was 5 cents a cup.
You know,
You remember gas prices?
definitely in the teens.
He worked at a gas
15
station.
cents kind of thing per gallon?
It's higher, maybe 18 to 20 cents when I first started, and then it went up to in the 20s. And when I was working at the gas station in the 50s, mid 50s, it was about 27 to 30 cents a gallon
And so at the gas station you worked at, you actually pumped the gas
for them and checked the oil for them
And washed the windshields.
and wash the
Do
windshield.
you think your descendants, is looking into the future, 2 generations from now, do you think there'll still be gas cars, or do you think there'll be electric or solar, or do you think there'll still be gas stations 50 years from now?
Probably not 50. It's almost like we talked about Kodak and having film developing all over. They had the little kiosks where you could develop film. You don't have that anymore. So I'm assuming gas stations were changed to electric battery stations or something, charging stations, something in that range. But they'll change the character.
So describe what would happen when you pulled up to a gas station at that time.
It would ring a bell.
All right.
I'm sitting in there inside a building with the windows open, it's like here, and I'd see somebody drive in. The bell would go bing ding. I'd walk out and ask them what they wanted, and
They could want as little as 50 cents worth of gas.
it was common to get $2 worth. And I'd put the gas in, and I said, "Do you want your oil checked?" They would. I'd check the oil and try to sell them oil because that's where you made money on it, and you also check the radiator if you could, and wash the windshield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they
And
never, never get out of the car.
No,
No.
never got a tip. I mean, seriously, there was no tips. It was just there it
It
was.
was all cash.
Yeah, it was. Excuse me. It was all cash except the company that I worked for was a spin-off of they call it refiners and what have you. And they had what was like a dog tag. And the dog tag, you could charge gas using this dog tag, and it went to a local company that would send them a bill. But most people paid cash and what have you. And Lynn's right. I made some number. I'd say 39 and a half cents an hour. And I never figured out how we got the half cents, but it always came out even. So, and I started working. I got the job because my Uncle Bill delivered laundry, towels and what have you to commercial businesses. And he knew the guy that ran the gas station, Tony Fabian, and he said they were looking for somebody, and it was a bike ride away from where I lived. So I got the job before I had a car and would ride my bike there. And then eventually that added up enough money where I could buy my first car, which I think was a 1940 Plymouth Coupe for less than $75 in that range, and I could drive to work afterwards.
Was it used?
Oh, definitely, it was used.
And kind of beat up?
Yeah, and
Is that the one with the hole in the floor?
that was one that was hole in the floor, and I started to paint the rust spots. So I had, before it got done, I had rust. I had red paint on a gray car, a brown car, and it was very, very distinctive. I could find it any place. Yeah.
Did he have this car when you guys met?
No, I had the newer one then.
Oh, you had the
48.
one from your grandfather, right?
No, I had one that 1948 that I bought at some point.
Did you lock cars? Did you lock your bike when you rode to work?
Oh.
You
Did
didn't
you lock
lock
your
houses,
house?
no.
You really, so
Never.
there were no locks.
Well,
We had locks, we just never
Didn't use
locked them. I don't know, cars had locks, didn't
Yeah,
they?
but I don't remember using them. But we had like, you see these keys that's got
the skeleton.
Skeleton
keys.
keys.
Yeah.
That's what we had for a house.
and then
They'd
somebody,
open all the houses, wouldn't they?
you know, when somebody got locked out, they'd ask you, "Can I use your key?" and go in it.
That's funny.
And then also, if I lost my key or my mother was gone or what have you, you'd open up the milk box and you could slide through. You could fit in and what have you.
A kid could.
Yeah,
A kid.
when I was a kid in grammar school, you'd go through the milk box to get in the house.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I said my father lived in in a 5-mile radius. My mother pretty much did the same thing, but she worked for our neighbor, the DeVizes, in the springtime, planting. He was
Was a
a
nursery.
nursery, and they'd plant seeds, and then you had to take whatever grew up and put them into a box, into a square shape, so they would grow up more effectively. So she got out maybe 10 miles and what have you, and that was their life until they retired. Well, I would say when they retired, because they went to Hawaii and they went to Europe on trips, at least. And that was the farthest, well,
They ever went
they
on.
ever went. But
So going, I know you guys travel a bit, and I know I'm jumping way ahead, but since you meant traveling, where's your favorite place in the world to go?
There's so many, we like so many. I love Hawaii, I loved Australia, I love California, and
Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Do you like Barcelona as much as Dad likes Barcelona? Because I know Dad loves Barcelona.
We were there recently with you, and we decided we would love to live there, but it's way too far away from all our family, and we
Don't
would
speak
have
Spanish.
to, yeah, we don't speak Spanish, and we'd have to make all new friends. It would be too hard for us at this age, I think. And doctors and, well, that would bring in
Yeah.
his health thing, so.
Any place that you would really like to go that you haven't been to?
For him, yeah, I'm pretty happy with all the places we have been.
Well, okay, I'd go back to Costa Rica. We haven't been there in a while, and we made Peru, but there's an awful lot of places in South America that we haven't seen that would be interesting to see. I've always thought Chile would be a neat place and what have you. And I think the highlight of one of the trips we took is when we went to Australia, and that's when your son was there. We visited him there, and then we took a cruise around New Zealand, and that's where the South Island of New Zealand is much like Northern California. A lot of wine and a lot of openness and what have you, and that's why I first had Sauvignon Blanc wine, which is now my favorite summer wine, and I can drink that and think of southern New Zealand as a nice, brings back nice memories.
You might want to point out you've had 2 grandchildren living in Australia.
That's true.
One is still there,
Yes.
who married a Canadian, and
There.
she's there with him.
It is June 11th, 2018. We are celebrating the 60th wedding anniversary of George and Lynn Meyer, who were married on June 7th,
1958.
1958.
You got it.
All right,
Great.
there we go.
And we're almost done with history, but we
Forgot about the Second World War.
Second World War, and you were talking about rationing and
Rationing.
stuff. Tell us about that. What's this card? You
Well,
have a ration card?
You
or
get a book, and you were allowed 1 coupon per person for so much.
Yeah.
There was flour. They rationed flour,
Sugar.
butter, sugar, bread
I'm
was
not
bread. I
sure.
can't remember bread, but I remember flour, sugar, and butter.
And
Across the whole country,
for the whole country.
yeah.
the entire country.
You
And
were
every
only
person-
allowed so much.
Plus tires.
Oh, yeah,
Correction. So the
for
point,
cars and,
you had lots of used tires going around and what have you. And remember I told you the 1936 Chevy, basically, they kept that for 16 years. They ended up welding fenders on the back of it because they rusted off. They put wooden side steps on it. Okay.
running boards.
Running boards, thank you, on it, and what have you, to keep it going. And
Talk about why, just real briefly, why
Oh,
cars
yep.
rusted out, because I don't know back.
Well, down
50
here in
years,
California, you wouldn't
Yeah,
have
and-
that
and
yeah,
there's
because they have the salt and the
salt on the road
roads
for the
and-
ice.
to melt the ice.
You know, Do you think maybe 50 years from now they might have heaters underneath the road?
They mind.
who knows,
No,
solar heat them and what have
Solar
you.
heater, I don't know. Anyways, I'm sorry. I just
No.
again, I digress. So, once again, these rationings. Where were you guys at, or how was?
Okay, well, I would just one other thing that was different. We had V gardens, the victory gardens, and in
In
the
your
city,
front yard sometimes.
front yard, if there was a vacant lot across from us, we'd plant food and what have you to feed us.
Vegetables mostly.
Vegetables for that and what have you.
So you were rationed if you grew your
You
own.
grew,
Right.
yeah, but
And they called them
And
V gardens.
Or
Yeah,
victory gardens,
victory
yeah.
gardens.
Yeah.
And some people had chickens for that reason
yeah, we
too.
we grew chickens in the yard. I mean, this
And
would be a yard
you'd
like
have
this, and we'd
eggs.
have chickens in the backyard.
And everybody was doing that kind of thing at that time.
Well, a lot of
A
them.
lot of them were, you know, if you had a family and you know,
Your son's back.
All right, so you had a book, and every person, every human got
Yeah.
a book.
well, the adults got them, the kids.
Just
yeah,
adults,
Yeah.
not kids.
I had one.
Did you?
Yeah, I still have it.
Okay, I don't remember having
And
one.
then you'd go up and buy.
Yeah, you had to give
You
a
go to
coupon.
the store and you have to give a coupon to get it.
Okay.
Then you still paid for it, but you had to give a coupon. They rationed you. You were only allowed so much. So you were very careful. A woman really planned her meals,
Yeah.
and you were very careful about what you used and
How
how
did you guys
used
feel
it.
when Pearl Harbor happened?
Well, you would
Where
I
remember
was-
that I
do
was
you
shooting.
remember when you heard about it?
I remember it. I didn't understand what it was.
Yeah,
about.
it was-
This is on the subject of rationing. Butter was rationed and what have you. And my grandfather was living with us, and we'd sit at a table. My mother would be here, my father would be here, I'd be here, my grandfather would be over there. And I can remember ticking him off because he had a piece of toast or something, and he put lots of butter on it. And I said, Grandpa, why do you put so much butter on that thing? And he got red in the face and got up off the table. And my mother apologized that I didn't know what I was talking about, and I wasn't reflecting what they said about him. Is what it boiled down to. And
So they sawed the limb off while you were out there on the limb. It
sort of like that.
was all him. All
Yeah.
right.
But you know, it was his grandfather, and somehow he ended up being Gramps at that point. And we took a trip up to Canada, at least one trip
You
up
and
in
him.
Canada, just the two of us.
Was this on your mom's side?
Yeah.
Your mom's
Yeah,
father?
yeah.
Okay.
And
Tell us about, if you're done with that
Yeah.
story.
Sorry,
Yeah.
going to Canada.
we went up to Canada and ended up. Our neighbor right next door, the other side of the driveway, was the Kennedys. We call him Pop Kennedy. He's the guy that gave me my haircuts in the summertime. He'd just trim off everything. And the joke was
Yeah,
my
his
mother wanted more taken off, so he took the razor and went straight down the middle and reverse mohawk. And my mother turned red. And anyhow,
And then he shaved the rest of it.
it made it to
Yeah.
match. But anyway, we went up there and fished for pike. There was a whole interconnected series of lakes up in Ontario, and they had a mound that like an artificial cave that they were making cheese in, and that was some of the sharpest cheese that we'd have. We always had the sharp cheese with the apple pie that my mother would make and what have you, and that was one of my fond memories I had of him and what have you. We went through a fort someplace up in New York, and he tipped the guide, it was a young man and what have you, tipped him 50 cents. And I thought, my God, he gives money away like mad. Don't buy a drink or something. I don't buy a Coke for 50 cents.
He was a big tipper. Huh?
Big tipper.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So tell us about your father's parents.
My father's parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened to your
At
your
Christmas
grandma?
time.
Oh, okay. At Christmas. Okay, the one that we started with.
Yeah.
Okay, my grandmother was going out to get cheese on Christmas Eve, I believe it was.
Because she had company.
She had company, and this is my uncle
Guy
and Aunt Carrie. And on her way back, and they lived in an environment with houses very close together, and you walk to the grocery store and what have you. Anyhow, on her way back, she's hit by a car and was killed on Christmas Eve. And the following year, my grandfather took it very hard. And the following year, he put his head in a gas stove and committed suicide. And that affected my father's relationship to Christmas all the time I can remember. He had a chair that he would sit in, and my mother made all kinds of arrangements, and I had toys and what have you. And he kind of sat there and drank and was very sober about the whole thing. He was really melancholy about the whole.
How old was he when that happened?
Let's see. He had to be in the neighborhood of the late 20s, in that range, and whatever, and that affected most of his life. Although, when you kids were born, he loosened up a little bit on Christmas because he was distracted. Maybe it died down, I'm not sure which, but. Combination. And it took me, I had to be a teenager before I realized and got the rest of the story as to why he was so somber in Christmas when most people were enjoying it and what have you. So.
Yeah, to lose both your mom and your dad on Christmas.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Then we just talked about the World War II. You don't remember Pearl Harbor very much. You remember the victory after winning World War II?
I can remember, again, my grandfather must have influenced me more than I thought, because when they dropped the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, and they talked about all the houses that burnt down and what have you, his comment was, well, they make those houses out of bamboo in Japan, so they're going to burn like mad, so that really wasn't that big a thing. It was just like a firebomb and what have you, and that was his perspective. And obviously, he was wrong in that, but that was his first comment. That.
Did you do anything to celebrate the win?
Well, the only thing we ended up doing, shortly after the war ended, our family bought steak, which was like the first time I can remember eating steak and grilling it out and what have you. We celebrated you couldn't buy the meat before then without rations and what have you. Now the rations stopped, so you could buy enough steaks for everybody.
Wow.
And at some point, thinking about it, chocolate must have been rationed.
Okay,
Because
candy,
because at some point,
sugar.
it had to be after the war. They had a Hershey bar that was about this big with little squares in it, and we were sitting around playing cards, breaking off squares of chocolate, eating candy. That was a celebration or something we couldn't have done during the war.
Nice.
And it's just strange that you don't think about that at this time. You get everything you want anytime you want. And,
How do you think the country would deal with that kind of situation today? Today being 2018, if there was rations introduced across the whole country, what do you think the reaction would be?
protest, one way or the other. But the point is,
It would be difficult, I think, for the children today. This is not a generation that knows how to conserve or not, it's a throwaway generation. It really is. They don't use leftovers. We used to mend socks, and sew things together and patch our jeans. Now you pay hundreds of dollars for holes in your jeans. That really is hard for us because
So it's not a generation used to sacrifice.
Right, they're not at all.
I had a coach, swimming coach, that basically promoted cutting your toenails because your socks would last longer. I'm serious. I mean,
It does, 'cause your
that was a pitch.
toenails
And
go
when it,
through 'em.
yeah, the other issue, I told you, my father was out of work for at least 5 years, with my mother supporting it, and with that kind of influence, you basically used up what you had, or made do with what you got, and you didn't just throw things away. And
didn't throw anything away.
We're fighting that now, trying to downsize. That we're throwing away perfectly good stuff.
Yeah, and it's hard.
It's very
Very
hard
difficult.
in the sense that I watch you kids throw away stuff and don't even think twice about it. We think twice about it and 3 times and 4 times about it, and yet right now with these conditions, that's the smartest thing you can do is unload stuff that you don't use and that's not valuable to you. Oh boy, that's hard to.
It's a very materialistic world today.
That's very easy for me
And
to say,
not
but very hard to
sentimental,
do.
because in our generation, we loved anything from grandparents or parents, and today they don't care, they don't want it. No sentimental values, and they don't need it. That's really the thing. We needed it. And today's generation don't, and they would not be able to, they would go crazy trying to figure out how to survive. It'd be harder for them.
We've got in our house furniture from my aunt and uncle Guy, from my mother, from her parents, and what have you, all handed down and all being used today, and what have you. That's going to go to Goodwill probably for the most part.
Well, and I think Mark has some of the stuff from Grandma Meyer
Yeah.
in his house, and I know I have.
You
some,
have the-
I have some stuff. I have a cedar chest and some beer steins from Grandpa Meyer. But you're right. For the most part, that
You don't need it.
I don't need it.
And if you think about it, I don't think that we needed it particularly, except that it was easier to take it
Yeah,
than to try to get rid of it at that time, and what have you.
and
But
you didn't want it to go to waste.
Right.
exactly, and that's still
Good
an
point.
issue.
What other differences that you did or had when you were growing up that aren't here today, that kids don't have to worry about growing up, or you don't, what's the difference between growing up when you guys grew up and growing up today?
The one big thing that I see is we were free, more free than kids are today. We
When you say
were.
free to,
We could go out and we could go walk anywhere, go anywhere. Till we walked blocks to the park, and nobody thought anything of it. I took buses by myself when I was 11. We went, we played outside without having to worry about being kidnapped. Children were safer, and we were freer.
We'd ride our bikes miles.
Anywhere, yeah.
Before you could drive, you could ride your bike any place you wanted to go, and it wasn't unusual to ride 5-10 miles or what have you. And, at one point, I ended up after I had recovered from the eye problems and what have you. I spent that spring, caddying out to Oak Hill, which was in a suburb, and I had to ride, I don't know, 5-7 miles on a bike to get out there to caddy, and what have you. Never thought anything about it, and nobody else, worried about it. And
So in 2018, you feel that kids wouldn't be able to ride those 5 to 8 miles to caddy at a thing for safety reasons,
both.
from-
Plus the fact, and I'm not criticizing. The point is, I've seen you basically take your kids to the restrooms. It's like, go kid.
Because we have to protect them from the
Yeah.
crazies out there. The crazies probably.
Well, you were aware of the crazies. We probably had crazies, but
Not as many.
not as many.
Well, there wasn't as many people either.
Yeah.
So everything's multiplied.
Yeah.
Well, my mother. The only thing I can remember is when I was brought home from the hospital. We were brought into a duplex on Illinois Street, and then we moved one block over. and she stayed friends with this neighbor on Illinois Street. And I was told to stay away from her son, who was 20 years old and what have you. And I tried to say, well, why should I stay away from him? Because he buys bicycles for little kids. And I said, that sounds pretty good to me. You know, I mean, she was trying to make the point that he's either a pedophile doing something or what have you. But that's the only thing along that line I can remember even being addressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kids didn't have the worries that they do now.
Yeah, no, they didn't have to worry about school shootings,
No,
car
definitely
bombings, or any of the kind of things that
not. Nothing like that.
that have made the headlines this year,
Yeah.
right? How does that make you feel about the next generation and knowing, you know, a big topic of conversation has been school shootings, right? Tell us how that makes you feel when you see those
Breaks my
events
heart.
occur. Say it again, Mom. Sorry.
It breaks my heart.
Yeah. Go on with that.
Well, because kids should be safe. They
Yeah.
shouldn't have to worry about those things.
When we were growing up or what have you, there was one girl that disappeared when, I don't know, when I was early, maybe before even teenagers, that one girl in Rochester disappeared. And that was a big thing, and they did the anniversary for 2 or 3 years afterwards, because assuming she was killed or what have you, and they never found her body and never resolved. But that's the only one I can remember of a violent.
Oh, the
Nature
Lindbergh
coming-
was the other one.
And that was
The
before our
Lindbergh
time.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we always heard about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyhow, it's just
And
Yeah.
now it doesn't even make the news because it happens so often, or
Yeah.
rarely does it.
Some
make
of
the
them,
news.
yeah.
Missing children, yeah.
Yeah.
But guns weren't an issue at that point. Nobody had guns and what have you. Now, in Rochester, there was a fair number of Puerto Ricans that came in at some point, probably when we were in high school, and they used to talk about knife fights and what have you, and between Puerto Ricans, though, that type of thing. And I don't know whether that was fact or not, but it was talked about at different times.
You know, one thing too, when we were married in 58, and in 59 you graduated from college, and we moved to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And we grew up in the North, and there was no discrimination between black people and white people in the North. But when we went to Tennessee, even though it was supposed to have been over, and I wasn't aware of how much discrimination there was down south, my sister and I went shopping, and we went to try on some clothes, and we went into this fitting room. It was just a big room, no dividers or anything, and everybody was just changing in there, and everybody looked at us. It turned out they were all black girls, and it was an all-black fitting room. They had black and white fountains. And supposedly the black fountains weren't cold. Ours was cold. And this was in 1959. It shouldn't have been anymore, but they were still discriminating.
When did Martin Luther King and this
He was starting about then.
So
He
that-
started because even then in Tennessee, there was a big billboard sign going out showing a picture of Martin Luther King at a particular training session that they made into a communist training session. And they basically tried to get him, 5960, trying to make him a communist because he went to this training session. So that, I mean, that was anti-propaganda
against Martin.
Against him.
King and what have you. And that's before it really started in the 60s. And
So
by that
up
time
in
we-
the north, in New York, from your experience, there wasn't any prejudice.
Well, we didn't have discrimination like that. We weren't separated. I don't remember ever being separated up there from the blacks. We didn't have a lot of blacks in our school, though.
well,
But you treated them just
Yeah.
equal. They were equal.
Right,
in New York.
and
Okay.
yeah,
well, the neighborhood that we grew up, my neighborhood that I grew up in, was basically in the 30s, was little Holland and what have you. They ended up having a lot of nursery things and what have you, and there was a lot of Dutch people there and what have you. And number 28 school was identified as Henry Hudson, who the Dutch explorer was. And when we had Thanksgiving, they always made the point that the Pilgrims went from England to Holland, and then they came back to get onto the Mayflower. So every school program that we had at Thanksgiving, they always had a Dutch dance going around and whatever. I never figured out why did we always dance, have the Dutch dance and what have you. And later on, when you look back, you see that. Then, in the result of the Second World War, Italians moved in and came in from Europe dramatically and what have you.
That was a big deal.
That was a big deal because they were distinctive and what have you. And when in this area where my mother lived all that time, eventually black people moved in, and we expected her to be perturbed about it. And she said, oh, "That's no problem. We will integrate it when the Italians moved in." So she just,
And your family came basically from Germany,
basically,
generations
back.
back. And
Yeah.
yours were based
English, Irish,
Irish.
basically.
Somehow
A
I got
little-
Irish in when they did the DNA.
Yeah, I said English, Irish, and
No, I said I got
yeah, you got more than I did.
Oh, interesting. That's from your DNA
Our
test.
DNA
Testing,
testing.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I don't quite know where that came from.
I don't know either, dear, because we were told he was all German and
Yeah.
he's not.
Yeah, that's what I've always been told. I was all German.
Yeah.
So,
So good mixture.
Maybe we start looking towards the future.
Okay, let's look to the
If you
future.
were talking to the next generation,
or 2 generations from now.
or 2 generations from now, what would be a piece of advice you would want to convey to them?
Okay, I'll talk from my viewpoint. As an only child, I was I was trained to save money, collect it, save it, and what have you. It wasn't until I was basically about in my 30s that we went to Maynard Avenue Methodist Church. They had a ashram there, and one of the purposes of the ashram was to get people to tithe. And I was working at Battelle, which was doing research at the time. I was doing research and metalworking research. Basically, when I was challenged to tithe, I basically said I'd run an experiment, that I'd tithe for 6 months and see whether it made a difference or not.
Can you explain just what a tithe is? Just
Okay,
in case,
10% of our wages would go to the church at this particular
or
time.
to God.
That's
God,
a
but-
biblical
Yeah.
standard. It's,
But it was basically we would give it to the Methodist Church at this point because that represented it. And Lynn was completely for it. In fact, she was probably pushing for it quietly to tithe because she was ahead of the game. But in 6 months, our life was better. Our relationship was better. And we've been tithing ever since. And because I don't understand why it makes sense, but it changes your attitude, your fundamental attitude, to give something away as opposed to holding it in. I mean, you always hear the Scrooge story and what have you, how you get all this stuff building up, but you only can use so much. And like a Bill Gates is giving away money like right and left and what have you. I mean, I think that's a much healthier balance. And that, I think the advice I'd give to any of our children and your children and their children is that you've got to share at some point and somehow. And I guess I really think it's important that you give to God, but it's also important that you share with other people that are less fortunate than you.
and it's not that God needs it; it's that you need to give it.
That's the
Yeah.
key point right there.
Yeah.
You know,
God doesn't
and
need it, you need
if
it.
you want to be blessed, tithe, because you will be blessed for it. But people have a hard time giving up their money.
I still have a certain hard time giving it up, but when you see the results of it over the long haul, I mean, we've got our health, we've got a good relationship most of the time.
Speaking of that, what advice can you give to your future generations about your being married for 60 years? What's the secret? to being married
Okay,
for 60
there's
years?
a lot of secrets, but the first one would be it takes three. It takes both of you working at it and bring God into it. If God isn't in it, it may not work. I mean, it could, but if you really want a good relationship, bring God into it. And it's just,
How do you do that? How do you bring God into a relationship?
you get down on your knees and ask for help.
Good answer.
That is a good answer.
That's good, yeah. Because I remember one of my first memories of you, Dad, or I don't know if it's the first memory, but you guys used to have an altar in your closet that used to pray every morning.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that, or what do you? I don't think you do that anymore, but why did you do that at one point? And whatever happened to that altar?
So it gave it to
We
the
gave it
church.
to the church
Yeah.
when we moved. It was because it said go in your closet and pray. Don't do it in public.
Nice.
And we quit it not only when we moved, but then I get up early in the morning to do mine. I do devotions in the morning and pray for all my kids and grandkids and all the people that I know need it. But the list gets longer and longer, and it takes time. You have to work at it. You have to read your Bible. Preferably, you're at least pick out some verses and memorize them because they come in handy when you have a problem.
And you're giving people advice. The one, we went to marriage counseling, the three things and what have you before we got married
Oh, that was with the minister.
with the minister.
We had
And-
to. It was required.
And the only thing that came out of that one is a part of you never grows up. And,
Part of
and
everybody.
Part of everybody never quite grows up. And when you see that in yourself and you see that in your spouse, you cut each other slack because that's life. You're not,
Yeah.
and that's probably a good thing because you can still act childish and have some fun and do stupid things without being regretful for it. That's just that's part of life that you need to be aware of.
And if you want to be blessed, just be a blessing to others. I mean, you can't.
And even my wife is not perfect.
That's my mom you're talking about.
Far
And
from
she'll
it.
say the same thing about me. So
Yes. Nobody is perfect.
But if you can laugh at yourself, you're at least reasonably healthy.
He has a wonderful sense of humor. I do not.
You do?
No, I do not. I'm
really?
way
She's
too
put up.
serious.
She's put up with me a long time. She's got a sense of humor.
That's cute.
That's cute.
You do.
So, any other advice about longevity, being married for a long time?
Work at it.
Work at it.
Don't
It
give
is.
up.
It is work.
Yes, any relationship takes work.
What would be what was the hardest thing for you, Dad, about being married?
Getting my ego out of it. I mean, I'm basically almost Mr. Trump in some ways, President Trump, from the viewpoint. I grew up as an only child, and I didn't have to give very much, and I was spoiled by my mother and father and my aunt and uncle, and so I had 4 adults
Doting on him.
doting on me, and my Uncle Guy was the one that tried to straighten me up better than most, and
How did he do that? By straightening you up, what did you mean?
he tried to get me to do things. Okay, he had me. This sounds dumb.
Nails.
Nails.
The nails.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
what I thought you were coming up with.
Straightening up nails.
Yeah.
And he had a coffee can full of bent nails, and I helped him build a porch floor, and my job was to get the nails straight enough where he could drive them in. And I just looking at it now and how cheap nails are and how much it's just like, where did this come from?
But they didn't throw things away. They
plus the fact
reused.
they were probably nails were not that much available during the Second World War.
Right,
It was
that's
metal,
true.
Metal, yeah.
metal and what have you. But it's just like in the summer, my father would when he was still a chauffeur, would go to Cape Cod with the family. So we were at my uncle's cottage, my aunt and uncle's cottage in Canandaigua Lake. So he was my male guide, if you will, my influence at that point. And he tried to make me behave, or go. Discipline, I guess, would be a good word.
So, Mom, what's your hardest part about being married, or what advice do you give? More advice.
There's so much that goes into it that it's hard to give advice. I don't like to give advice. Because it depends on the two people involved. But again, it's the work. You have, forgiveness.
Okay.
That's a big one.
That's
There's
good.
a lot of forgiving to do.
Now, who has to forgive more? Does he forgive you more, or do you have to forgive him more?
I have to forgive him more. There's no doubt about that.
Because he just said he doesn't grow. He learned that.
He's self-centered.
He learned that from the minister that he doesn't have to grow up.
Right. He doesn't have
let's
to.
say I don't particularly like to watch The Big Bang
No,
Theory
that's
because I'm too related to Sheldon.
Okay, 50 years from now, none of you guys will understand.
No, they won't.
No, but that's just. No.
That's a TV program.
They may not even know what TV is 50 years from now.
That's right.
It's hard to say.
I had a thought that someplace when you were talking that one. I'm not sure what it was anymore. So
Well,
About
let me ask
who-
you this: how much did faith play a role in a successful marriage? Talk
Everything.
about your faith.
Everything. I wanted to leave him many times.
Yeah.
He would make me so angry. But the one
Let's
time
slow down on that
I was
part.
really going to leave him. And I told him, when you come home, I'm not going to be here. And I didn't want to just leave him a note. I hated people that did that. I'm straight up, honest person. And he ended up getting down on his knees. And I didn't want him to because I wanted to leave. So it played everything.
yeah, one of the smarter things I did, more spiritual thing I did.
And what about prayer? How did that fit in?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. I'm just going back for something. When
Yeah.
you said giving advice, I think I figured out you don't give unsolicited advice in the sense that then I'm preaching at you and what have you. And the point is, advice that isn't asked for isn't helpful.
Throwing pearls to pigs, huh?
Almost that, but I mean, it's
They resent it more than they.
If someone isn't open to say I need help or I would like to hear your advice, it's almost like you're doing. It's a waste of time and effort, and it's so easy to slip into judgment. And I think one of the things we've worked at is not judging people, accepting where they are and
Yeah.
how they are at, and saying, hey, if they've got a problem, it's their problem, not our problem.
Yeah.
If we can help, that's
We
one
would.
thing. But we're not wise enough to help sometimes,
Yeah.
because especially when you get into the enabling issue,
Yeah.
how to.
Okay,
Go,
I want
no.
to go back to not only faith, honesty.
Definitely.
Don't play the games.
Yeah.
The more you're honest, the better the relationship.
And you've seen those games played by
Many
other couples.
times. Oh, yeah.
What's the effect of that? If you play the games, and what does that mean? Play the games.
Play the games is not being honest. You're not admitting you're doing anything wrong. Here comes Marley. You're not, if you don't admit something's wrong, you can't fix it. You've got to be honest, and if you're honest with each other, you're more accepting. You realize why the person's doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And
Honest with yourself.
Yes.
Look in a mirror.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think those two things are very important in a marriage: is honesty and faith.
That's great.
Do you define faith, just so the generations know what you mean by faith.
A relationship with God, and you have to talk to Him every day. You have to study His Word. You have to go to Bible studies and learn. It's not gonna. You got to learn about. It's the same in a marriage. You get married, but you don't really know that person. You get to know them, and you have to get to know
you're
God.
lucky.
What?
I said, if you're lucky, you get to know.
Right.
That's just.
And again, you work at it, and I don't want to be repetitive in that.
No, but it's good. I think part of what's made you successful living, 60 years with each other and being married and raising children that are good people, good, that have faith themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I would think that we would want from all of our descendants is people to have faith and have a relationship with God and Jesus. And
Yeah, that's
Well,
uppermost important.
I don't know where exactly it got in her family, but Lynn was much more honest than I was in background. And when she told you the job that she had counting money, thousands of dollars a day. Didn't you have somebody that was looking over your shoulder
Yeah,
trying
the
to
boss.
figure out?
And I didn't even know it. The other girls in the office would tell me, she sits there and watches you.
She thought she was going to steal money and she never did, that kind of thing and what have you. And when you're egocentric, you can kid yourself that I'm better than I really am. I mean, that's one of the points of not being honest. I can sit here and she can say I'm egocentric and I've caused her problems and that type of thing, but I would have normally argued with her about it and tried to make the point. I'm not really as bad as you're pointing out and what have you. And when she realized she's honest and she's calling it the way it is, she sets me an example that I really
so not
am
only
happy
being
with.
honest with each other, but you have to be honest with yourself. That's what
Oh, yeah.
What I hear you're saying.
That's probably the hardest one because if I get BSy with her, she'll say, "Hey, come on, stop that monkeying around."
Now, did you always do that? Like at the beginning of your relationship, did
No.
you always call him on his crap?
No, I took it for years.
That's why I really regret it because she did take it for years.
Yes, and I shouldn't have. But I was that type of person. I'm a giver, and that's just
How did you get out of taking it for years to?
threatened to leave him. I just told that story.
Yeah. So that was it.
That was the only thing that made him change. I kept complaining and complaining. It didn't do anything.
So threatening.
Maturity helped a little bit on my part.
Yes.
At
Yeah.
what point did you threaten to leave him? How
Uh,
often? And
How often? Well, we don't need to go into all that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying
No,
to
at
make it
what
light.
point, we had all 4 kids.
Okay, I was just trying to make it light. I didn't know
No.
that was going
Yeah.
dark. I was sorry.
Yeah.
But the point being that relationships are changes as you mature and as you
Does.
as you get intellectually smarter, and I'm not quite sure what I mean by that, but the point is, as you get out of your egocentric, as I got out of the egocentric thing, I could start reaching to other people, though I don't do that well.
He does it better than he thinks he does.
Well, sometimes. But who was it was talking about having to recharge? Somebody told the point about they wanted to go read or something
Yeah,
and
you have to go away, and
get recharged and what have you. I still need that
we
at
don't do
times.
that enough.
That's why our trips seem to help. in the
Yes, they
sense
do.
There's only 2 of us, and we
Concentrate on each other.
limitate the
yeah.
distractions and what have you.
It's hard.
And that's a good practice to bring out that you can't really do that when you got 4 kids and you're stressed and you're trying to make a living and all that sort of
What would
business.
you have
But
done different to stay closer while you had 4 kids? Is there something you could have done different?
For me, it was getting closer to the Lord earlier. The earlier you do it, the better off you're going to be. I waited too long. I didn't wait. I mean, it happened
Happened too long.
that
I
way.
understand.
and with me, it happened too slow. I guess is what you.
Yeah, I don't know that it did, but we kind of grew our faith together.
Yeah, one time we went to a hotel in Columbus, in the big circle one. That was going to be a weekend away or something. And when we left the kids with Kelly,
Yeah.
we did it once.
I used to beg him to
I didn't know what that's.
no. I used to ask him.
That's been really memorable. What a great weekend that was. We'll have our fifth one. We'll have our fifth kid.
No, I used to ask.
That she used to ask to get away.
But with him, he always took it and changed it to what he wanted. Always. It wasn't. He never cared it wasn't that he didn't care. I guess in his way, he thought he was doing what I wanted, but it really was what he wanted.
Well, I was just doing it better then.
Oh, now we can see the ego. That I was talking about.
He's an engineer. You didn't give him clear requirements, see? So he had to engineer the rest of the weekend himself.
I would. He would tell me, if you tell me, I'll do it, and I'll tell him, and it didn't make a bit of difference. He still went his own little path.
Interesting. That was funny.
So what it basically was saying, it hasn't been always easy.
No, it isn't
But we've
easy.
laughed, we've cried, we've
But we still
prayed.
love each other, and that helps, having a lot of love, and that comes from God too. He has blessed us with a lot of love.
And laughter.
Okay, your guys' call.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
up to you.
whatever you want to say to your hopefully great grandchildren, hopefully maybe at least great.
If it stays around that long, huh?
Well, you have one great grandchild already, so hopefully you'll have more great grandchildren, and then maybe their children.
Yeah.
So whatever you want to.
Okay.
You didn't like that what I gave you, that thing you sent all to us.
I did like that.
Yeah.
You
I
have
don't have it. I don't know where I gave it to Dad. I don't know where it ended up.
No, we got it.
You don't have to read it. I just
No.
was wondering.
no, just to bring it back to his mind.
You know, the one that I would like to say that we're puzzled by, you know, the philosophy in my approach is to relieve pain instead of spreading joy.
I wanted.
That's I
I
don't.
was going to say that when we were talking about tithing, but I didn't want me to put my influence on that. But
Yeah,
I really.
there was a couple of times I wanted to insert something.
Yeah,
I
but-
want it to be your words.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because I was trying not to do that.
Yeah.
But I like that a lot. You
Yeah.
give to relieve pain, not to spread joy.
Maybe that'd be like some of the concluding statements then.
Yeah, I just thought that because that's a good way to.
Wrap it up and give
Well, I don't know. It's
Yeah, I
just
think
good-
it's a great message
Yeah.
in general, yeah.
Anyways, okay.
He's probably running already.
Oh, are you?
No.
Oh,
No,
How did you know that?
What?
Has he got a smile on his face?
because he's looking at it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, great. We got just.
All right.
What the?
Did you guys want to talk about your grandkids and kids? Do you want that in there or not?
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So we're almost done. So you just
Is he gonna?
go.
All right. So as we start to wrap things up, is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you would like to say to the next generation and the next generation who may not have an opportunity to meet you personally?
Okay, I think I'd like to say that I love them, even though I don't know them, all of them. I know some of them. We have 4 living children. I had 2 miscarriages. We have 12 grandchildren, 1 3/4 great grandchildren, and we love them all. And I guess I'd like to say it's hardest to do the right thing, but the right thing is always the best. And stay in touch with God.
And you've been praying for them, even
yes.
praying for the ones that they're going to marry.
Yes.
Which is what I think
All my grandchildren and my children.
you might as well start praying for the great grandchildren. That's gonna,
Yes.
But the point is, there's a continuing factor here in the sense that if you look at it, basically from our background, we have created a successful family in the sense that we are basically all reasonably well educated. We are not super flakes one way or the other. We've set a foundation that we would like to build on the foundation of success. And success means more than money. It basically means the way you live and your value system. Probably, that's one of the things I eventually figured out. The value system is the key to successful living. And I made a transition when I was probably just under 30 at Patel, doing research, and I suddenly realized, or I got the point, I was creating my own problems. I was creating problems for myself. And you have to look at it realistically, that if you're creating problems for yourself, the only person you can change is yourself. I can't change any one of you guys. I can't change any one of our grandchildren or spouse. I can encourage them to go in certain directions, but it's got to come from within them. And I think we've given you all good genes. One way or the other. You've got intelligent genes, you've got emotional genes, and you've all got your own quirks. And it's going to continue on in the generation. And I hope you can enjoy your quirks and enjoy life, because it's meant to be enjoyed. And I'm not quite sure, that doesn't mean money. It doesn't mean one thing. It means a whole spectrum of things to enjoy. And we look to the future with promise, and there's going to be problems and opportunities. Make the best of them. That's all we can tell you.
Great.
That's
Yeah.
that's
Thank
the end.
You guys did great.
you.